Warning, this podcast may be disturbing to some listeners. Due to the graphic nature, listener discretion is advised. Welcome from wherever you are. This is the Demon Inside podcast. I'm your host, John Venom. If you would like to review another episode of the Demon Inside, you can go to Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and any podcast platform. And please, don't forget to subscribe and rate us with 5 stars. A new episode will come out once a week. We will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
The voices were talking to me and telling me, let's do it again. Remember how good it felt? The feeling that you got. We're going to do it again.
Hello, my Demon Insiders, and welcome back to the Demon Inside. I'm your host, John Venom, and today we will be talking about the demon inside Gene Meredith. Gene Meredith was a killer that the police believe was a serial killer, but they only convicted him of one murder when there could have been 2, and there would have been more according to Gene because of the voices in his head are actually the voices outside of his head. We're going to get into that, but before we do, let me give you just a brief background on Gene because anything that I tried to find was really hard to find. I found some paperwork from the courts about him trying to get his case dismissed because due to mental issues, which I believe Gene did have. He started off at the age of 18, but let me start this way. Gene was born in Lansing, Michigan, and he lived with his mom and his stepdad, and while he was with his mom and his stepdad, he used to get abused. Now, according to this documentary I saw, which was The Killer Speaks, Season 2, Episode 1, and I would suggest you guys watch this because I'm going to be referring to this back and forth. Because like you know, I like to go directly to the source, and Gene is actually giving an interview on this show. So if you get a chance, you need to watch The Killer Speaks Season 2, Episode 1. And there's a certain part that I really want you to see. So we'll get into that as well. But anyway, Gene says that when he was a child, he was mentally abused by his stepdad. Later on, he kind of contradicts that by saying that he was getting slapped and bullied like when he was a kid. Now, I don't know if he's talking about the kids at school or if he was talking about his stepdad, but I know his stepdad was one of the bullies. Gene went to school, graduated at the age of 18. He joined the Air Force when his buddy or his roommate from the Air Force started to slap and bully Gene around. Now, all of a sudden, these voices started coming out in his head, which I do believe these voices were not just demonic presence, but also schizophrenia. Now, what the doctor on the show calls it, she calls it schizoaffective disorder. And for me, to be honest with you guys, every time something new comes out, every time that there's a different symptom or a couple of symptoms wrapped together in one, they start calling it different things to put a name to it. For instance, if you're angry, they call it anger. If you're happy, they call it happiness. If you're sad, sadness, and so on and so on. So with these mental issues, they start calling it different names like schizophrenia or schizoaffective or bipolar or depression, things like that. And I'm not trying to take away from that, but I'm just saying that these are names that could possibly be a demon or the demon's name, because a lot of these demons like to take the names of murder, hatred, porn, just like with Ted Bundy. And what these demons do is they create this scenario that ends up with the psychiatrist trying to define it, and they usually define it in a new term. So for Shannon and the people at the Mayo Hospital, if this doesn't sound right, I apologize. I know you guys are fans. I love y'all. And I just thought I'd throw out that shout out to you guys. But for me, these psychological terms are not the cause, but these are a way to reference what's happening to a person so that other people know what they're talking about. Why can't it be a demon that is either portraying himself as these symptoms, or it's a demon that these psychological doctors actually named? Let's continue. So Gene was, after when he was in the Air Force and this guy was bullying him, the voices came out and started telling him to make this guy pay. And so he grabbed an iron and he was about to strike this guy and kill him, but he resisted. Okay? So this is Gene, 18 years old, resisting the voices that are shouting at him to get revenge, to take, to not let them bully him anymore. But he did resist, and he started to travel the country, and this was the kind of guy that would go around, pick up a job, and then quit, and pick up a job and get fired, or pick up a job and then just keep moving. He wasn't one to stay in one place. Now, the way Gene defines it is that he was trying to get away from the voices in his head. My question is this. If he was trying to get away from the voices, he said that the voices would catch up to him. Does that mean at certain points in his life he lost the voices? Because think about this. If you're mentally sick, let's put it this way. If you have a flu, you can't drive 100 miles down the road and get rid of the flu, and then it's going to come back to you. This mental issue was something that he said was following him. So for me, that could be a demon. Now, it doesn't make it that he's possessed, or at least not yet. But let's continue. So later on in life, in his 40s, Gene was 48 years old, and he was living with a woman, an elderly woman. And supposedly he hadn't killed anybody or anything, but when he was living in Great Falls, Montana, there was a woman that ended up dead at a laundromat. Now, she was choked to death. Then about a month later or a week later, something along those lines, they never said that Gene killed this woman, but there's a lot of belief that it was him. So later on, he is with a girlfriend named Debbie Bailey, and him and Debbie were getting to the point where he wanted to live with her. He decided that the voices weren't talking to him too much. He started taking pills, and then he wanted to move in with Debbie. Well, him and Debbie would drink, and to start drinking, he would stop taking his pills for his mental condition so that way he could drink, because you're not supposed to drink with your medications. Now, on this part, I agree. His mental stability needed to be controlled by these pills. And by him stopping and starting and stopping and starting so that he could have a drink or drink a lot, it's not a good thing, because it gets out of your system, it gets into your system, it's back and forth. And as somebody that takes pills for PTSD and anxiety and depression, missing once or twice, it does affect you. It might not affect you that day that you miss it, but it might affect you in a couple of days. So for those of you that do take medications for depression, bipolar, and all these other mental issues, please don't stop taking your medications. You really need to take those. And I'm sorry I'm even throwing that out there, but I'm just saying, as a person that takes medications, you really need to do that, because if not, it makes you feel so different. But Gene was saying that the medications that he took weren't making him feel like himself. So he would stop and he would drink and he would be himself. But that's when the voices started coming back. Now, and let me ask this. How is it that the medications stop the voices, but also so did traveling? I don't understand that. But let's continue. So anyway, Gene decided he was going to move in with Bailey, and she decided it was okay. And they were together, and all of a sudden, something happened that Gene got very upset, and he started choking Debbie. And she started telling him that she loved him, and she loved him, and why was he doing this, and she loved him. And he stopped. And he felt really bad about it. And he said that the voices were so loud in his head, but he decided he wasn't going to kill her. He told her to not tell anybody because he was embarrassed by what these voices were telling him to do. And he really did want to move in with her, and he wanted to have a family with her. I mean, she already had a son. She had a couple of sons, and you know, he just wanted to be a part of a family. What ended up happening was she told her friends, told her family, and they told her to stay away from him. So Gene gets upset with her family and with her sons and with the friends, and Gene decides that he's going to go kill her sons, and he's going to go kill her two friends. He's going to go stab the son, and he's going to go shoot the two friends that she told. So he drives out to the son's house of Debbie, and he's outside in a violent rage. And he says that all of a sudden, he sees a woman sitting there. And this was Rose Torres. She was 51 at the time. And I know I usually don't say who these victims are because I don't want to give these murderers that power. And I don't want to connect their names to the person that killed them because they do not deserve that. But this woman, and I have to tell you, she was an ex-guard for a prison, which makes it a little bit of a difference. Now, she was sitting outside of the house, just a little bit away from where Gene was yelling, and she was smoking a cigarette, and he saw her. He walked up to her. They started talking. She kind of calmed him down. He asked her if they wanted to go to a bar, and I'm going to let him describe what happened next.
Here I was waving this knife, yelling and screaming for Ed to come out. And then I noticed her. She was sitting to the side against the signpost. Somehow or another, Rose calmed me down. I sat down next to her and started a conversation with her. But in my head, the voice was saying, she's going to say something. She's a witness. You got to get rid of the witness. No witnesses. No witnesses. I asked her, would you like to stop at the bar and have a couple of drinks? She said yes. I was talking with the voices. And they started telling me she was going to be the first one. And then we're going to get the rest of them.
He resists the voices. But then
she started smoking all my cigarettes like Debbie used to do.
Rose takes his last cigarette.
And then the voices came back to me, and they started saying, she ain't no different than Debbie. Let's do her in. As we were walking, the voices were turning up the volume. They were continuing getting louder and louder. The voices are saying, pretty soon, Gene, pretty soon. We started walking down the alley. Voices started telling me, this is it. This is where we're going to do it. Tell her to get undressed. She took her clothes off and folded them and set them beside the dumpster. And she laid down. And that's when I took out my knife. I said, now this is for you. I stabbed her here, 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 here.
So now what we have is that she took off her clothes and put them in folding order. Now, who would do this? Now, think about this, and this is why I brought up that she was a guard. If she felt threatened, I think she would have fought. I don't think she would have given in, because I don't know of any guard, ex or present, that would just give in and fold their clothes so that they could get raped. I don't think this was the thing. What I think was, because Rose was having a problem with addiction, with drinking. And that's how she lost her job. That's how she lost her family. That's how she was homeless. Because of this drinking addiction, I think that a demon could possibly have taken over, could possibly have manipulated her to sacrifice herself to Gene. And that's why she took off her clothes and folded them neatly. Now, in this short amount of time, you have 2 murders in this little town of Great Falls, Montana, that things like this don't happen. So, of course, the police are trying to figure out what's going on. One of the police investigators calls an informant and asks him if he had heard anything about this. And from what they got, as far as a description of a vehicle. Now, let me tell you this. When he killed this woman, Rose, he threw her body into the dumpster. And there was blood and all this stuff. So Gene went home. And he was fine. He says that the voices in his head stopped. And I'm going to play that for you now.
Each time I stabbed her, the voices were turning down. They were getting dimmer and dimmer. And when I cut her throat, the voices seemed to disappear all completely. Just like when she was deceased, the voices were gone.
But later on, the voices told him to go back because he forgot the bag and it had his fingerprints on it. But by the time he came back, like he said, there was 2 people there that were witnesses that saw him. And they told him, what are you doing? And he said, oh, I'm looking for my dog. And they said, no, this is a crime scene. The police are coming. And Gene goes up to the dumpster and reaches in. And they're like, what are you doing? You're messing up the crime scene. They go, the police should have been here already. And so Gene gets kind of scared and goes back into the van and leaves. Now, the van has these 2 white doors, and it's a blue van. So it's very obvious. So this police detective, like I said, reached out to an informant who comes back a couple of days later and says, hey, there's this guy who drives around in a blue van with white doors, and his name is Gene Meredith. So these people go, the cops go, and they go to Gene's house where he's staying, or they actually go to his work first. They go to his work, but he doesn't work there anymore, and they're trying to play catch up. And one of the detectives sees the van and says, I know whose van this is. It's a picture of the van. He goes, I know whose van this is. He goes, I've had deals with her before, and this was Debbie Bailey, Gene's girlfriend. So they drive over there in a hurry. By this time, Gene and Debbie have already been fighting, and the voices in his head said, you need to kill her, and you need to kill her now. So Gene goes to the kitchen and grabs a knife and comes back. Debbie sees it on his face and knows that she's going to die. She walks out of the trailer home and closes the door and sees the police. They're there at the door. And she says, please, don't tell me somebody died last night. And then at this time, Gene walks out, and he's just okay and happy and smiling, and the police ask him, hey, can you come down with us to the police department? And can you, recount for where were you at last night? So Gene goes in and he starts doing the they start doing the interrogation with him. Well, then Gene doesn't become Gene anymore. What happens is, and this is kind of like one of our things that I'm showing, or that I'm trying to show you about the demon inside. When you get a chance, like I said, you need to look at the video. You need to look at the show, The Killer Speaks, Season 2, Episode 1. When they start talking to Gene in the interrogation room. Now, it's bits and pieces, but there's a part where they say that he changes personalities from Gene to anger. This is the name of the thing that's inside of him. The police notice that Gene, throughout this interrogation, he's turning to his right and looking and talking to somebody as if somebody's talking to him in his ear. If you look at the video at that moment, you'll see half of the video turns kind of blackish and then disappears, okay? I don't know if it was a mistake in editing. I don't know if it was the camera. I don't know anything. But I never saw that again. That was the only time that glitch happened, was when Gene was turning from Gene to anger. You have to watch it. It's very important. So now Gene goes on and talks about his anger, who is inside of him. And I'm going to play that for you in their interrogation.
Who am I talking to? Am I talking to Gene or him now?
He's full of rage. He's full of anger.
Easy.
He's full of rage and anger.
All right. Okay.
Come on.
Okay.
What does he tell you to do?
His affect would change that you knew which person you were talking to. He would look at you, his eyes were piercing, his teeth would jut out.
Wait, what?
Tone of his voice, his inflection would change.
He's coming.
Gravelly voiced, just evil persona.
You don't have nothing. You don't have no murder weapon. You have nothing. You have nothing. You can't harass him. You can't harass me. You can't harass anybody. You don't have nothing.
Enough. I want Gene back.
No, I'll give you Gene back when I'm ready.
This anger is like a second character inside of Gene that comes out whenever Gene is feeling scared. And this happens a lot of times with people with multiple personality disorders, except this one isn't in his head. This one is speaking to him from outside. As Gene says, the psychologist on the show characterizes it as a good personality and bad personality on your shoulder, and that's what Gene says this is. It's a good and bad personality. Couldn't this be the demon inside? Gene says that for a long time, he's had these demons, he's had these voices telling him to do things. And here's my problem with the whole thing as well, as far as diagnosing him with something other than demonic possession or demonic infestation, is that he travels and he gets away from it. He takes medications, he gets away from it. He kills this woman and the voices stop. As a matter of fact, he says that they're gone completely. For me, Gene has a demonic presence. And every now and again, this demon will get inside of him because Gene thinks that this is a different persona that is trying to help him. And this persona is acting like he's trying to help him, but he's not. This is anger, right? Quote, unquote, anger. This is a demon of anger. But yet, at the end of the show, the producer asked him, do you still hear the voices? And he says, yes, I hear the voices. They're helping me answer these questions. She says, do you still feel like killing? He says, no, he has no reason to be angry. Is that because they stopped humiliating him? They stopped punishing him? Or is this because the demons just decided, shit, there's nothing we can do anymore? It was fun using them, but I'm going to move on. Because remember, yes, I do believe that he could hear voices in his head or around his head, and he's a mentally disabled person with schizophrenia, where you hear voices, where you see things. When this demon got inside of him or got near him, it started focusing his attention and growing in a certain pattern, which was growing, seeing, or hearing good and evil. If you're a kid and you have schizophrenia, you're going to see what you want or what you know of or what you hear about. So if you see, as a kid, let's say you see Ronald McDonald, in your head, you're going to see Ronald McDonald, you're going to hear Ronald McDonald, as well as whoever else it is. Now with him at 18, he heard these voices saying, hey, get him. We're doing this for revenge. This guy disrespected you. Just like, and he says, Rose, the victim, she took his last cigarette at the bar when they went to go drink. That was why he killed her, was because she took his last cigarette and it showed disrespect to him. Just like his girlfriend, Debbie, who would always take his cigarettes. So now I ask you this, okay? Is this demon possession? Is it demon infestation? Or is it just him being sick and using this as a way to get out? Me personally, I believe that this demon is there. Maybe it would get inside of him when Gene would let it. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. But what I'm saying is that our mind, when we become victims of something when we're young, our minds become fractured as adults. And as an adult, sometimes we cope with things the easiest way we can. We don't take our efforts to go head on. We like other things to solve our problems. Some of us sometimes use different names for us to get away with things so that we could say that wasn't me, that was so-and-so. That was my other personality. The thing is, they're all Gene. And if this demon was talking to him, remember, he could have resisted. He resisted when he was 18. Why couldn't he resist as a grown man of 48 years old to not kill somebody? He let these things get to him, and now they're at peace. They should be more violent because they're restricted and they're confined. It doesn't make any sense to me that somebody that is schizophrenic or schizoaffective would have all of a sudden decided to calm down and be okay. Wouldn't that anger, wouldn't that rage still be in him? Why would it have calmed down? And we're talking about prison, guys. We're talking about guards that disrespect each other, disrespect the prisoners. We're talking about prisoners that disrespect each other. And he's not angry anymore about it. I think the demon decided, I'm done using you. I'll let you have your sickness, and I'm out of here. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll talk to y'all next week. Have a good one. Don't forget to subscribe to the Demon Inside podcast on any podcast platform. A new episode of the Demon Inside will be released every week. Let us know what you think of the episode on all our social media platforms. If you have any questions or comments, go to thedemonincidePodcast@gmail.com or click on the link down below. We would love to hear from you. And to become a Demon Insider, go to our website, thedemonincidePodcast.com. We thank you for listening and hope you will join us next week for a new Demon Inside podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell your friends. I am John Venom, and I'll see you next time. If I don't get possessed. The Demon Inside was written and created by James Porter. It is a production of Venomous Entertainment. Background music is by Lucas King. And the title song, Demon Inside, was produced by Rice Pulver, composer lyricist Peter Shelley, and performed by Conjure One.